ready for school? Okay.
No.
Yeah, I mean, a couple years ago, me and my wife and the group that I'm a part of, we really confronted the world church. I mean, they don't like us. I mean, I understand. When I was growing up as a child, I was a part of the world church. I mean, I even spent 6 months in a monastery. I learned to be one of them. This is before I knew who I was. At the World Church, it was something we ended up fighting. And we took them down. We took away their power. We didn't really confront them physically. They were always sort of a looming presence in our life. But in the reality of it, we took away their spiritual power. They had this incarnation of the forecaster god named Pluto, whom had basically provided them with power. He had killed one of my predecessors of Father God incarnations, stole one of our hiding hoods, which is the key way that we as people in the temple are able to do what we do without getting into trouble. During these times, I've just realized that we didn't really deal with the world church. Rather, we dealt with their main leader of the time. But whenever there's a void created in governments, religions, someone always steps up to fill that void, I guess. Maybe they're not as good as the predecessor or as powerful as them, but it doesn't mean that group is just going to disappear. And I should have thought of that. I should have kind of kept that in the back of my mind. And, so now it's just more real now that it's becoming more physical. Before it was more spiritual because their main power source, their main leader was spiritual. But now that the spiritual leader is gone, that doesn't mean all the physical stuff is just going to fall apart. It just means a physical person like Nicholas is going to stand up and fill the void of the spiritual one. Now that Pluto's gone and the gods have stripped him of his ability to associate with the world because he had broken the rules so drastically, they have to fill it somehow. And Nicholas stood up and was appointed and is obviously now leading it all. Now, I guess historically, incarnations have always had to move closer to a Father God, and it's always been the rule of the gods. And if you didn't, the rule was you weren't allowed to be active as a god. Throughout this whole event in this last year and a half, I've begun to realize that that's probably a good rule. What I had done throughout the past here is I set things up so that the incarnations that I was around could they could be active to a degree, and that's a line that was able to be sort of skirted. I was able to kind of walk that line, not going too far in one direction on either or, which made it difficult on my life and on those around me, my family and stuff. Because I've always had to make the tough decision to hold back my life to make it so that their life could be better. And which really doesn't bother me too much, because I think that most of us who have families and loved ones and are in love with people, it's just natural to want to go out of your way for them. And I don't think that that's anything special. I think it's overplayed as being heroic. I really don't. I think that all of us are doing this. When you're in love with someone, when you do what you do, that should be part of love, I believe. Going out of your way for those you are in love with. Love is something powerful, and it drives you to go out of your way. So I really don't think it's special. I just think it's part of life. So that's just an opinion I have, but it's one I think is real. I really do. I have talked with the goddess of love and beauty, and she talks like that. She talks as if she expects me or anyone else just to do what they do because of their love for another. Like it's just, well, that's normal, isn't it, to her? Why wouldn't you go out of your way, even if it limits your life a little bit? It just seems natural to her. And I don't think we understand that much. I mean, we think of the goddess of love and beauty and fertility as being this goddess that is like the Venus statues, very sexually attractive, and it's not that she isn't. She loves that stuff. I mean, more than when I go to see her, she's never dressed. I don't see her in clothing. At first, it was a big shock to me because, don't expect that from a goddess. All the goddesses I had ever spoken to prior to her, they all came in very nice clothing, sometimes period specific, sometimes of the period I'm in now. Even the different incarnations of the fertility type goddess, of the goddess of love, came dressed. So I'm not saying she doesn't, lean towards fertility and that type of stuff, but I'm just saying she is also the goddess of love, and it gets missed. And she gets demonized by the world church as being this evil, lustful being. Anyways, so I don't see it as heroic, and I don't want anyone to think it's heroic. It's not meant to be heroic. It should be everyone's life. And if it is heroic, then everyone should be heroic, and that should be the norm. And I know that if that's the norm, it downplays heroicism. Well, then that's what it needs to be. Well, with my conversations with the gods, my understanding of how I have had to associate with the people around me, I have begun to realize I can see why the gods had made it a stipulation that you had to be close to be active. And especially in an eras of past when communication was limited to letters or in person. I mean, it's not likely you're going to be very active if you can't even phone call someone to, do something quickly. Now, all of this really came about because the forecaster insisted, from what my understanding of things, in the beginning of time, that he insisted that there be no communication between incarnations. So that's key point here. He wanted no communication. The compromise was the father denied that idea and said, well, then I will compromise with you. I guess we all do this anyways in our lives. We compromise with each other. Well, he compromised with the forecaster and said, instead of no communication at all, how about there's a distance, and I limit the amount of communication based upon distance. Now, that distance was not fully defined, so I was able to walk a line there and skirt it a little bit here and there. And when I went too far, the forecaster would say something to the father, and the father would go, okay, we'll back off a little bit. I'll tell my incarnation to not do this or that, not go hang out at the houses of other people, not to do, and it's a delicate line to have to deal with legal things. The whole thing is to make it so that everyone, despite their actual physical location, they can be spiritually close. Really, that's important to me. I think it should be important to anyone. Probably is to everyone. I know love sure believes that one.